Subcommittee on Homeland Security will come to order. I am pleased to be joined by the subcommittee's distinguished ranking member, the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Underwood. Welcome, Acting Director Lyons. I thank you for being here. While we await the details of the full fiscal year 26 budget request, the focus of this hearing will be upon ICE's operational priorities and the resource requirements to execute such priorities. I want to make sure that your agency has what it needs to do the very important job at hand, and I welcome the discussion today. I'll now turn to my colleague, Ms. Underwood, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Amadei, and I'd like to welcome our witness, Todd Lyons, the Acting Director for U.S. Customs and Immigration and Customs Enforcement. As the federal agency charged with the enforcement of violations of customs and immigration laws, the scope of ICE's investigatory and operational work is broad. ICE has an incredibly important role in preserving public safety and national security by combating cartels and other transnational criminal organizations, investigating illicit drug trafficking, including deadly fentanyl, human trafficking, and smuggling networks, and going after violations of trade and intellectual property laws that seek to undermine our economic security. However, since January 20th, we have seen a shift in priorities by this administration, away from data-driven, security-focused approaches and towards impossible, politically driven goals like 1 million removals in a year. Leadership at DHS, and ICE in particular, are operating with disrespect and disregard for the foundational constitutional principles that govern our country. As we endeavor to secure the homeland, we must continue to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. As I told the Secretary last week, that is not a secondary mission. But under the Trump administration, ICE's work appears to be dominated by egregious mistakes, misuse of taxpayer funds, and flagrant violations of constitutional rights like due process. Let's take last month in Oklahoma, where ICE sent 20 armed agents with their rifles drawn to storm the home of a mom who was home alone with her young daughters in the middle of the night. These American citizens who did nothing wrong were forced to wait outside their home in the rain during a midnight investigation that had nothing to do with them. Agents reportedly confiscated not just their phones and laptops, but also their cash savings. Again, these are U.S. citizens who, based on publicly available information, were never implicated in any of the crimes being investigated. It's not even clear whether the family's devices and savings were ever returned to them. Your department has issued no apology, taken no accountability, just doubled down. How can Americans trust an organization that operates like this, that treats them like this, with their national security? ICE is the second largest law enforcement component within DHS, America's largest federal law enforcement agency. You are charged with upholding our laws, which start with the Constitution and Bill of Rights, representing our values as Americans and using taxpayer dollars responsibly. And the standard we expect from our federal law enforcement is excellence. The American people deserve nothing less. But instead of prioritizing the actual greatest threats facing America, because we all know the data shows encounters at the southern border started declining in March of 2024 and keep hitting new lows, this administration is cashing checks it does not have to reach questionable goals it cannot meet. You're removing people so hastily and with so little care that you're defying court orders. Your department is wasting millions flying the secretary around the country for publicity stunts so that she can post photos on social media from operations that are still ongoing, putting actual agents at risk. Let me be clear. You are roughly 2 months away from running out of funding and a violation of the Anti-Deficiency Act. As I said to Secretary Noem, the reliance on funding from a reconciliation bill that has not passed Congress is an incredibly risky strategy that sets you up for failure. Lastly, let me remind you of Article 1 of the Constitution, which gives Congress and only Congress the power of the purse. Increases to ICE at the expense of other national security programs and initiatives that members on both sides of the aisle voted for undermine our core work and congressional intent. And if this committee provides funding for your agency, we have every right to oversee how those taxpayer dollars are spent. Last week, ICE blocked members of Congress from conducting an unannounced inspection at the Delaney Hall facility in New Jersey. That too appears to be in violation of federal law, which clearly states that we have the right to enter ICE facilities even if we show up unannounced. Mr. Lyons, you cannot accept federal funding and then shut the door on oversight from the people's elected representatives. ICE is already burning the money Congress appropriated. And frankly, right now, ICE has much more work to do to justify being entrusted with even more taxpayer dollars. I am deeply concerned about the administration of funds by this department, but ICE in particular. And I'm glad we have the opportunity to discuss this further with you today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thanks. Thank you. We'll now turn to committee members for questions, and we'll start. Oh, you know, I keep trying to cancel opening statements by agency heads, and I want you to know it's nothing personal. The floor is yours, Mr. Lyons, for your opening statement.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. Chairman Amade, Acting Ranking Member Underwood, and distinguished members of this committee. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. As I've said many times, I'm honored to lead the most versatile, agile agency under the Department of Homeland Security. I am proud to stand along and represent more than 20,000 ICE personnel whose determination and resolve drive them to protect national security and promote public safety, even in communities would fundamentally disagree with U.S. immigration law and attempt to undermine our investigations and enforcement turns at every action. Our officers and agents are villainized for upholding and enforcing law, but the bottom line is they put their lives on the line to serve this nation and protect our families, friends, and neighbors. In light of this service and sacrifice, one of my main priorities is to keep ICE running smoothly. I can do that by working with you to ensure we have the resources we need to keep our workforce safe, keep promises made by President Trump and Secretary Noem, and meet our obligations to the American people. That is why these people are depending on me and you to secure those resources. In just over 3 months, the Trump administration has significantly increased our operational tempo. We've arrested more than 88,000 aliens so far during 2025, which is a 39% increase from the same time period in fiscal year 24. Of those arrests, 65% took place after January 20th, the day President Trump took office and took action on his pledge to make America safe again. We have also arrested 95% more suspected gang members, 655 more known or suspected terrorists, and 46% more aliens with pending criminal charges or convictions over the same time period. After years of being told to stand down instead of investigating, arresting, and removing the most dangerous criminal aliens from our community, ICE's brave officers and agents are now allowed to do what they signed up for, enforce immigration law in the interior. But it's just not about our enforcement personnel. During fiscal year 24, ICE's Office of Principal Legal Advisors represent the Department of Homeland Security in more than 1.8 million removal hearings and obtained more than 280,000 removal orders. With our increased operational tempo since President Trump took office, we have more criminal aliens in custody and more cases going before the Department of Justice immigration judges. Our attorneys are working around the clock to preserve the rule of law and protect our fellow Americans from the most dangerous threats to our republic. I would also ask for resources for our mission support staff, who ensure we bring in talented, capable, and agile officers and special agents. These dedicated professionals maintain our information technology structure, ensure our workforce has the support they need, and serve as stewards to all ICE resources. Our officers and agents arrest some of the most heinous criminals that are responsible for crimes against our community. They enforce immigration law in the interior, keeping dangerous criminal aliens out of our neighborhood and away from people we care about, and remove illegal aliens who refuse to follow the legal immigration pathway to make their homes in the United States. They serve as protective shields between Americans and the people who pose the greatest threat to our values, our freedoms, and our way of life. We need adequate funding to fully execute the responsibilities Congress has given us and to uphold our obligations to the American people. That is why I'm sitting here before you today, asking for your agreement with the resources requested in the fiscal year 2026 presidential budget. Again, I thank you for allowing me to speak with you today, and I look forward to answering your questions and giving you the information you need.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Henson, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. What if I don't want to go to Ms. Underwood? Okay. Madam Ranking Member, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Lyons, in fiscal year 2024, ICE was provided funding to support 41,500 detention beds. This was agreed to by Congress and carried forward in the fiscal year 2025 continuing resolution. Whether the administration likes it or not, that is what the law provided. And with ICE's current bed count at over 52,000 beds just last week, you are not abiding by the law. As I mentioned in my opening, you are maybe 1 or 2 months away from running out of funds to support this current level of operations. If reconciliation doesn't pass before the end of the fiscal year, what is your plan to avoid an Anti-Deficiency Act violation?
Thank you for your question, ma'am. And I appreciate you recognizing the good work earlier in your statement that Immigration and Customs Enforcement do. The men and women really appreciate your support. Counting on reconciliation is not a plan, ma'am, and that is not what we are doing. ICE will not run out of money because we are fiscally responsible to ensure that we meet what the Appropriations Committee has outlined for us and what Congress has given us to work within the means in order to keep our operations going smoothly and ensure that we're protecting the American people.
So what you characterize as fiscal responsibility, we know that the department is already trying to take funding from CBP and CISA, and that will only get you through June. It sounds like there is no plan to get ICE back to following the law in the direction of 41,500 beds, even with DHS encounter numbers, quote, at record lows. You are claiming success and demanding more, and the justifications we're seeing from this administration just aren't adding up. Mr. Lyons, with the power of the purse lying in the Congress, and if DHS continues to spend like this, we will have to look at how we can tighten those strings. Moving on, like most Americans, I am alarmed that ICE is trying to build more detention facilities while reducing oversight of those facilities at the same time. Last week, DHS accused members of Congress who were exercising their oversight responsibilities of, quote, illegally breaking in to an ICE facility in New Jersey. The department's spokesperson said, quote, had these members requested a tour, we would have facilitated a tour of the facility. Mr. Lyons, members of Congress do not have to request a tour of ICE detention centers to be allowed in. Federal law explicitly requires you to admit us even if we show up unannounced without previously requesting a tour. In light of this incident, what actions are you taking to ensure ICE employees know the law and are following it? And have you issued a memo or guidance to the workforce clarifying that members of Congress must be admitted in these circumstances, or are you requiring additional training?
Thank you, ma'am, for that question. I appreciate it. Ma'am, I'll go back to the Consolidated Appropriation Act from 2020. The staff knows that we are fully supportive to ensure that the oversight that is granted by law by this committee is abided by. So we have proper access and oversight from the men and women of your committee and Congress to oversee what Immigration and Customs Enforcement are doing in our detention centers. We have nothing to hide. I hear with a promise that ICE will be fully transparent. We do acknowledge that any member of Congress does have the right to show up for an inspection of one of our facilities in their oversight capacity. In this situation, we would ask that while it is unannounced, that Congress elected officials do respect and into accordance with the Appropriations Act in Section 532, presentation of ID to go through screening, don't bring any contraband, things like that. We do also, and I'd like to just point out that congressional staff does require 24 hours. We did encounter that over this weekend, and we did address that, and it was handled properly, and those tours have been scheduled. So yes, ma'am, the staff is fully aware of the Appropriation Act of 2020, specifically 532, which grants that oversight.
Okay, excellent. The law is unambiguous on this issue, and we expect ICE to follow the law. With my remaining time, I want to discuss the deaths in ICE custody. In just the last 4 months, we have seen at least 7 deaths. Since 2018, ICE has had a congressional requirement to make this information publicly available on its website, but there's a 90-day delay, and it seems to be missing at least 3 more recent deaths in custody that we've received notifications about. To date, what is the total number of deaths in ICE custody since January 20th, 2025?
Thank you, ma'am, for that question. Our total death in custody right now is up to 9. We do conduct a thorough investigation on all of those, between the Office of Professional Responsibility as well as the local jurisdiction as well. ICE is, as I said, dedicated to transparency, and I will assure, ma'am, as a get back, that we get all the information back to you and your staff.
And publicly available
And
online as pursuant to the congressional directive.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I yield back.
Does anybody have any objection if I go to Ms. Henson next? Seeing none.
What state?
Iowa, last I heard.
Best state in the nation, that's right, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Henson, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Acting Director Lyons. Thank you so much for being here today. I want to commend the men and women at ICE for the work that you do and President Trump for issuing that directive to get back to real enforcement of our immigration laws. And I want to thank you for your unwavering commitment to doing that and for coming to testify here today. Our borders are more secure than ever because of that leadership, and ICE is, I know, working tirelessly, putting lives on the line every single day to take, as you mentioned, the most dangerous criminals out of our communities every single day. And these are people who have entered our country illegally, breaking our laws. That mission does become significantly harder when local jurisdictions are not cooperating and instead are willfully choosing to put the safety and security of their communities at risk and the lives of your agents at risk as well. Sanctuary city policies not only undermine federal law enforcement, but they also create safe havens for bad actors. They obstruct access to critical data and information and disrupt efforts to dismantle the transnational criminal networks and the gangs that are exploiting our immigration system, endangering public safety, and continue to funnel illicit activity, drugs, fentanyl, and human trafficking into our communities. So what challenges, Acting Director, do you face when local jurisdictions refuse those detainer requests for your agents or are barring access to databases that could give you that critical information that you need to link to those criminal networks? Are there legacy programs or maybe even holdover administrative burdens that you recommend eliminating as a result of that?
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your respect for what the men and women of ICE do every day. They are true to the mission. They swore to serve, and they do put their lives on the line every day. So I appreciate you recognizing that. One thing about sanctuary cities is sanctuary city policies, while they're there to protect the migrant community, also puts communities at risk as well. It allows violent criminal aliens to go back into a setting that they were already removed from by a law enforcement agency. A law enforcement agency already deemed that individual a public safety threat and arrested them and put them in custody. What ICE would look for is to keep not only the community safe, but the officers and agents of ICE safe, is to work with sanctuary cities to take those individuals into custody in a secure location. One that it's not outside in the community, one where it doesn't put officers at risk, one where it doesn't put the actual criminal alien at risk. One of the things I would say about the lack of information sharing is under the previous administration, there were many individuals that were released into the United States without proper vetting. Without having access to systems like driver's license databases, registry of motor vehicles, to have police reports to know what these bad actors did in the past, it really hampers our ability to track and find these individuals. One thing that ICE is dedicated to, especially with the Department of Homeland Security, is tracking illicit drugs and fentanyl. When these drug dealers are allowed to get back in our community and we can't find them because a sanctuary policy blocks our ability to have that information and track these individuals, it's not making the community any safer.
Right.
These individuals are out there dealing illicit drugs, and it's hampering our ability.
Yeah, and I have no doubt that people have died because of those sanctuary city policies, and we need to do everything we can to protect American citizens. So again, thank you for that information, and please let us know if there are policies we need to be looking at changing to make sure that those folks are cooperating with you. I think Iowa is a good example of a state that I work with our local law enforcement, have those conversations, that good information sharing, and we want to make sure that's happening all over the country. I want to shift gears a little bit and highlight HSI's critical role in combating trade-based crimes. Many of those are driven by the Chinese Communist Party. Those include forced labor violations, IP theft, transshipment schemes that are really posing a direct threat to our American workers and our small businesses, devastating our American manufacturers and our supply chains here in the United States. What additional tools, personnel, or legal authorities does HSI need to more effectively, number one, investigate, but also to prosecute these trade-related violations that are, again, undermining our economy here in the United States?
Well, thank you, ma'am, for that question, and thank you for recognizing what HSI does. Homeland Security investigations is a key part to the Department of Homeland Security. It's instrumental to what ICE does for keeping this nation safe. While we have increased Title VIII civil immigration enforcement, we are extremely focused on threats outside our borders, especially from the People's Republic of China. And that is one thing that we would look for: more support in technology, more innovation to help us with these tools for these databases overseas, as well as more officers and intel agents and analysts that could work with us to really identify these foreign national threats that really are affecting our infrastructure, because that's one key part that Homeland Security can do, is not only help protect outside the United States, but help key critical infrastructure and trade here in the United States and keep those secrets safe.
Well, we're certainly trying to work on that. I have a piece of legislation protecting American industry and labor from International Trade Crimes Act that would give your law enforcement partners a little bit more resource to be able to do that. So hopefully we can get that passed, and thank you so much, sir, for appearing before us today. Thank you, Mr.
Mayor. I
Chairman.
appreciate it.
Pride of the Gulf Coast from the Lone Star State, Mr. Cuellar
Thank you, Mr.
is
Chairman.
recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. Thank you so much. And thank you, Administrative Director, being here with us. I appreciate the work that the men and women do for ICE. I've been working with them since I first got started here. In fact, I started off with one of your agents, Al Peña, who I think became Deputy Director of ICE some years ago. Well, we're in Laredo. We started the BEST program. That is the Border Enforcement Security Task Force. Since then, we put it into language. We've expanded it. I think you got over 70. And it goes after the cartels for drugs, trade, et cetera, et cetera. How's that coming along, the BEST programs?
Thank you, sir, for bringing it up, and I appreciate the work for former Deputy Director Peña. The BEST program is an excellent program. It does protect our homeland, specifically through the work of what Homeland Security Investigation does, not only for the criminal cartels, but illicit activity and long-term investigations on the border. Recently, the President signed the executive order with the establishment of the Homeland Security Task Force. I think the committee will be happy with the results of what these task forces will do. It'll bring to bear all the federal resources of Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security to focus on these transnational gangs, these ones that are bringing in fentanyl, these illicit drugs that are coming into our communities. Not only that, but they'll focus on these transnational cartel organizations, along with foreign terrorist organizations that do threaten our border, not only the southern border, but the northern border, as well as our maritime interdiction, which has increased greatly. Just last night, Homeland Security Investigations had their first indictment for support of terrorism material in San Diego, which is one of the actions that you'll see coming out of the Homeland Security Task Forces.
Good. Well, I appreciate the good work that the program does. Are we still at about 1.3 million final deportation orders? I know your work is very hard, and I remember Director Morgan many years ago. Some people want you to do more, some people think you're doing too much, so trying to find that balance is always difficult. But where are we on the 1.3 million final deportation orders? And I don't know if that's still the correct number.
Yes, sir. It's approximately 1.1 million final deportation officers. We're actively still prioritizing those and attempting to affect those removals. As the President said it on the Secretary Noam, we did prioritize, and we still are prioritizing the worst of the worst. However, during our investigations and when we are out in the communities, should we encounter someone that has a final order, it has been lawfully ordered, removed, or deported from the United States, ICE is going to uphold their sworn duty and take that individual into custody and effect that removal order. But to your question, sir, ICE is actively working on those final orders at this time.
Good. Yeah, and I understand what happens if you run into somebody, you can't just close your eyes. But as long as you focus on criminals and final deportation orders, national security threats, that would be good. Let me go back to, it's actually Section 527, very familiar, because myself and some other folks, we added that language. In fact, we added language on oversight of the detention, because ICE doesn't really have detention, so you have to go to the private sector to do that. But we put specific language, one where a member of Congress does not, it says specifically, doesn't have to give notice. Staff might have to give notice, but members can go in and act accordingly, number one. And then on the oversight, health, food, whatever needs to be provided to the folks that are being detained. We have very specific language to make sure that those private contractors are following that, and you all are following that oversight that Congress has set up.
Yes, sir. Yes, we are. And that's one of the things that I am proud of is ICE does have some of the highest detention standards. But unfortunately, that does hinder a lot of local partners partnering with us because due to the high standards that ICE has, it's cost prohibitive for a local law enforcement agency, state, or a sheriff's department to actually enter into ICE because they would not be able to afford.
Okay. And just finally, years ago, we started the border coordinating processors for Border Patrol because we wanted Border Patrol to be out in the fields and not changing diapers, making sandwiches for migrants. Very important, but not for the agents. We want more support staff for y'all, so make sure you keep asking for the support staff so you can have the agents doing their work instead of sitting down behind a task. It worked very well. For Border Patrol, we did a lot of things for Border Patrol, border processing, support staff, mental health, support staff, because everybody goes through that situation. So just make sure you ask the committee for that support.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Chair now recognized for 5 minutes for his questions, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Siscomani.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Acting Director Lyons, for being here. Thank you for the work you've already done and you've been doing for our country, for leading the men and women in ICE. Very important task. It's something that the American public clearly had their focus on when we talked about this all last year and then what we saw here in the last 4 years specifically. So it's a very important work and also a tall task. I visited the Eloy Detention Center, just the detention facility in my district this Monday. So I was just there this week, and I got to see obviously the operations of it, and it was quite eye-opening. I've known a lot about this issue for a long time, but visiting there helped me understand things even a little better, and also the challenges that we're facing. We obviously made, this administration has made a stated goal of removing 1 million people a year. That's a goal. That's to Mr. Cuellar's point as well. And after my visit to Eloy, I think I better understand the complexity of what needs to happen for us to meet that goal, how expensive that can be as well. To be frank with you, it was very eye-opening to see what's happening now versus what was happening just a year ago. And not only disappointed in what was happening, but pretty shocked, and it's scary to see what was happening, the releases that were going on, the lack of cooperation with other countries to be able to deport people there, how we've shifted from just deporting to some of the neighboring countries to now having to fly them all across the world now. So the challenges are so different than any other administration has ever faced. So with that, can you speak to the resources that you're going to need to increase deportations to be able to reach that goal of 1 million a year?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I appreciate you going to visit the men and women down there. They appreciate your support and the opportunity to show you exactly the challenges they face. One of the challenges we have, sir, is ICE doesn't detain in a punitive way. We detain to remove. So one of the hindrances we have for us is the ability to actually, when people have gone through their due process and gone through the immigration proceedings, to effectively remove them in a safe and humane way. That will rely on more airplanes, more charter companies, things of that to effectively remove them so they don't have to be in custody that long. You know, that's one of the price points with detention is it's a high cost. But again, we don't hold for punitive reasons, we hold to remove. So the ability to remove people quickly and safely and humanely is something that we would need. We would also need assistance with the immigration backlog with the immigration courts. That is one that's extremely a bottleneck for us with all the legal proceedings and the due process and appeal process that illegal aliens have while they're in our detention facilities. The backlog at the immigration level in regard to the immigration court, it does hinder our abilities to remove people quickly. We hope with the committee and what we asked for in the budget to get some more immigration attorneys, our OPLA attorneys who do great work for the agency, to work with the Department of Justice to streamline that effort.
That's excellent. Those are good points. We'll make sure that we give you the support that you need there. I learned a lot as well about the coordination needed with the travel documents from other nations and how some nations are a little more challenging than others. Not only the access to those airports, but actually be able to get the documents and how long that takes. So a lot of challenges that you're dealing with that. With the time I have left, I also learned here during my visit that, and I was pleased to hear that most of the jurisdictions around the Eloy facility are cooperating with ICE in terms of communicating and giving ICE access to their jails as well. I understand that you all focused on criminal removals. Obviously, that's the main one. We have heard horror stories of those released by previous administration committing crimes against Americans, and it seems to me that by coordinating with federal authorities, our local governments can make our streets safer. You mentioned that the risk of sanctuary cities and how that actually puts the community at risk more than anyone else. So how many local jurisdictions have entered the 287G program, and can we at this committee help raise to an even higher number?
Well, thank you, sir, for that. I would say that ICE, we have increased the 287G program over 300%. There are a lot of partners now that are signing up to assist with ICE, but those local agencies do need financial support and the legislative backing to continue to work with ICE. We welcome all partners because one goal is, especially for myself, representing the men and women of ICE, is to be that viable law enforcement partner and be that actual public safety tool to help communities. So any cooperation, any support we could get along the lines of the 287G program or any legislative or congressional changes to the Immigration Nationality Act, ICE would welcome that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Gentleman from Hawaii is recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lyons, I'm trying to just understand the FY 2026 budget and how it's coming out, especially as it affects ICE. So as I understand it, the skinny budget that came out for the overall Department of Homeland Security proposed a substantial increase of about $43 billion, which was about 65%. But all of that is in reconciliation, and I completely endorse the ranking member's comments on the complete inappropriateness of the use of reconciliation for base budget decisions. You also apparently are proposing in that skinny budget substantial reductions in the base budget for key federal agencies such as FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, Transportation Security Administration, key for air travel. So these are all key agencies, and we obviously disagree with the proposed reductions in those key agencies. However, if you add that all up, it seems to me that if you're reducing your base budget by $2 billion, that it's going to be increased somewhere else. If your net is zero, which I think you've said, are you anticipating that there will in fact be an increase in the president's budget in ICE, and where would that increase come from?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Appreciate the question. I'll actually have to refer to Secretary Noem and her testimony and the Department of Homeland Security, sir, as ICE doesn't have any input on CISA, FEMA, or TSA's budget. What I would say is that I said to the ranking member is it's fiscally irresponsible for us to rely on reconciliation. My goal is to work with this committee, work with members of Congress to ensure that we are financially responsible and that we work within our means and what the committees legally and through the budget have set for us, and we ensure that we spend the American taxpayers wisely.
Let me ask you in a different way then.
Yes, sir.
Maybe you can answer this question. Where do you think the greatest financial stresses are in ICE, where you would, in an analysis of ICE, want to increase your base budget?
Yes, sir. Obviously, the one big key piece of the ICE budget is detention space, sir. Detention space and our removal contracts. That is one of the key parts to our budget right now. That is a large piece. But also, sir, we are focusing on ensuring that the other programs, much to the one that the ranking member brought up, Homeland Security Investigations, our Office of Principal Legal Advisors, that we make sure they have the right tools and resources to focus on the public safety threats and the national security mission.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Focusing within ICE on Homeland Security Investigations, HSI. I appreciate my colleague from Iowa's comments, very much a supporter of HSI, both domestically and from the foreign policy perspective, because as you pointed out in your testimony, crime doesn't stop at our borders, and neither do we. And so you have, as part of your HSI team, a very extensive team around the world, including, I think it was 90 offices in 50 countries, as I recall. Are you intending to preserve those offices? Obviously a rhetorical question, because I do believe that those offices are key to our foreign policy, especially as we're withdrawing in other aspects of our foreign policy. These are key not just for law enforcement, for networking and partnership with our partner and ally countries around the world. Is there any threat to those offices?
No, sir, it's not. And I can guarantee you here today that, especially in your region, Indo-Pacific region, that's a key national security element to the safety and security of the United States. HSI is a key component to that. We are dedicated, our resources out there. Like I said, in maritime operations, illicit drugs, human trafficking. And not only that, sir, but we're dedicated to the cyber intelligence and the counterintelligence of that region. When I first became the acting director of ICE, one of my first meetings was with the DOD, Criminal Investigative Services. I met with NCIS, CID, and specifically we focused on the Indo-Pacific region in regards to our military bases to work jointly to ensure that we had no incursion to those bases and to ensure that HSI is a key part of that counterintelligence piece in that region.
Okay. And I would commend to you your Pacific Islands Liaison Initiative, which President Trump actually started in the first part of his administration. That's a key ingredient to be preserved in that context. I yield the balance of my time to the ranking member.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that a letter from Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez dated today, May 14th, to the subcommittee regarding events last Friday, May 9th, be inserted for the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. I yield back.
Does the gentleman yield back? Yes, I yield. Chair recognizes Mr. Gonzalez for 5 minutes for his questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Director. Y'all been doing a fantastic job getting back to law and order. I represent Fort Bliss, and Biggs Airfield has been at the epicenter of getting things back on track. I've visited there several times. These repatriation flights work. One of the issues or one of the concerns that I have is staffing. You know, when I visited a few weeks ago, I noticed that there was only a handful of civilian coordinators on the ground. You know, when you have 3 people kind of sharing a shift, that makes it difficult. Can you, my specific question is, what role does ICE have in ensuring that the bases that are actively assisting with repatriation flights, like Fort Bliss, are adequately staffed, especially with civilian personnel?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, and I thank you for the question. One of the things recently under Secretary Zome's leadership in this administration is the whole of government approach we've taken to addressing our current needs within ICE. DOD has been an excellent partner, specifically, sir, Fort Bliss, Biggs Airfield is a key part to that. Through our contracting and budgeting, we want to ensure that we actually have men and women, officers and agents who carry a gun and badge out protecting the homeland, doing the job that they swore for. It's going to be key for us to recruit and maintain and really hire these key civilian contractors to help us achieve that mission. By having those contractors working at the facilities, as far as medical care, housing, food, processing, that'll ensure that, as I said earlier in my comments, that we are moving swiftly, because since I said ICE, we do not detain for punitive, we detain and remove, to move that process quickly, and as well as get the men and women who are sworn law enforcement back on the street.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Can you speak, how many ICE flights have we performed out of Fort Bliss? Do we know how many illegal aliens that we've successfully removed? Details matter.
Yes, sir, and I'll take that as a get back and get that exactly for your office. But ICE Daily is doing flights every day. Just yesterday, we had over 55 missions going international all over the country. And that is one of the things that I'm dedicated to, is ensuring that we do not have a bottleneck in our detention, that we are not clogging up detention space, and those that have actual final orders removal or deportation orders, that we are swiftly and humanely returning those individuals back to their country.
Excellent. I look forward to continuing to collaborate on this. I want to make sure that ICE and ERO, that y'all have all the resources you need, you have all the personnel, you have all the policy you need to go out and perform your mission. And I appreciate you working alongside DOD. I think this has been very successful. Once again, highlighting the fact that Fort Bliss has been the epicenter. It's working. It's working in a very positive manner. My next question is on task forces. Task forces work, especially HSI-led task forces. ICE is certainly a big part of that as well. Can you just speak to the importance of it? You know, as we're working through the budget process, we're trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. What is your thoughts on task forces?
Sir, my thoughts, 100% task forces are the key to securing the homeland. You know, under the executive order with the establishment of the Homeland Security Task Forces, there'll be Homeland Security Task Forces in every state addressing those issues at the border in north and south, as well as our maritime operations, but really hammering down on those public safety threats that are in those communities, specific to states and regions. And I think the key is having the whole of government come together between Department of Justice, all of the entities within DHS, bringing all those law enforcement entities together in the intelligence network that has will help us cripple or, you know, eradicate these transnational gangs, these transnational terrorist organizations that are actually operating within the border and on the border. I think task forces are the key to that.
And my last comment is, you know, we had the Secretary Noem testify before us last week, and she highlighted there's over 600,000 confirmed convicted criminal aliens loose in our country, and that's a huge number. And it's going to take everyone coming together to make sure that gets taken care of. Once again, convicted in a court of law, criminal illegal aliens, and ICE is going to be key to that. Thank you for your testimony, and Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, sir.
The gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Escobar, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Director Lyons, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your service to our country. I represent the border community and the people of El Paso and the people of Fort Bliss, and no one values border security more than those of us who live there and folks like me who've raised our families there. And while I appreciate the important role federal agencies like ICE play, especially when it comes to fighting transnational criminal organizations, cartels, fighting illegal drug trafficking, what we've seen under the Trump administration should send chills down the spine of every American. The fact is that the administration is not focusing on the worst of the worst as it claims. According to public reporting, the focus has largely been on immigrants who are here both legally and those who are here illegally, but who mostly pose absolutely no threat to the public. Students with green cards and visas being snatched by masked men from the streets and disappeared to detention facilities far from their homes. People with legal status with no criminal history, no criminal record, being targeted for enforcement activities. Members of Congress being denied entry for oversight purposes, despite having the legislative authority to do so, and more. This is the kind of disturbing pattern we see in authoritarian police states, not in a democratic republic. Most Americans may not know that ICE is a relatively small agency and that the vast majority of federal funding doesn't go for federal operations per se, it goes to private prisons and their CEOs. We've also seen certain members of Congress benefit from the stock trading associated with the growth and expansion of some of these corporations. Detention facilities should adhere to the strictest of standards. Local jails have to. But the track record for some of these private operations is abysmal. And I'd characterize what happens inside of them as tantamount to human rights abuses. We've seen overcrowding at these facilities, medical negligence leading to a number of deaths, including that of a 27-day-old baby. We've seen children in these facilities whose weight loss has been so severe it's life-threatening, lack of access to toilets and water, inadequate nutrition, and more. In fact, per your testimony this morning, there have been 9 deaths so far in the last few months alone. At the same time, we've seen the costs per bed per day for these facilities increase. The increase in cost to taxpayers obviously hasn't translated into an increase in humane conditions, but I bet it has meant an increase in profits for these private companies. That's what American tax dollars have been funding. And through the Republican reconciliation bill, we're going to see explosive growth in immigration detention and therefore likely explosive growth in what we've seen so far. $80 billion of an increase in the reconciliation bill. We're seeing a 365% increase for detention annually, a 500% increase for transportation annually. I am wondering, if you have this information, how many total detention beds does the reconciliation package create? In other words, what does that increase in funding via reconciliation translate into in terms of beds? And can you tell us the cost per bed per day that we will see through reconciliation in fiscal year 2025 and 2026?
Thank you, ma'am, for your question. In regards to reconciliation, ma'am, as I said earlier, ICE is fiscally responsible for us to focus on reconciliation on something that hasn't happened. What we're focused on is working with your committee and working with members of Congress to ensure that we do add to our bed space capacity in the proper and fiscal way. The main question that you had earlier, ma'am, as far as detention bed space and the cost, that does fluctuate from region to region. What I would really like to ask this committee and help on is in a lot of these sanctuary jurisdictions where we would not have to work with private corporations. There's a lot of state legislation which bars cooperation with ICE. We would much rather partner with a sheriff's department or a state corrections agency, somewhere that's in a state where an individual is arrested, that we don't have to transport all around the country due to lack of bed space. We would really appreciate the support on that.
So, Director Lyons, back to my question. Have you looked at reconciliation and how much bed space that would create?
Yes, ma'am. We are currently, ICE is right now, we are forecasting to move forward on 100,000 beds. But however, we don't have that money now. And what we're working is within our means and the budget that we've been provided to ensure that we work with this committee to be financial and the bed space and manage that the correct way.
My final question, and I have more, which, excuse me, I will submit to you, but I
Yes, ma'am.
also represent Fort Bliss. We know for a fact, I used to serve on the House Armed Services Committee. We know for a fact that in the past, when military bases have been used for immigration purposes, it has degraded our military readiness, which is one of the many reasons why I oppose using Fort Bliss for detention. But do you know how many beds and the cost per bed that's slated for Fort Bliss?
Ma'am, I would defer to DOD on the cost as DOD is providing that portion of the budgetary piece. Fort Bliss, right now, we're looking at approximately 3,500 beds at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I'm out of time. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Acting Director, if you know, and if you don't, then you need to get back to me on this. How many beds is DOD supporting across military installations for detention purposes for you guys? Gitmo, Fort Bliss, whatever. Can you give us a ballpark number?
Yes, sir. Right now, at Fort Bliss, we do have 69 detainees at Fort Bliss right now. We have reached out to other facilities such as Fort Leonard Wood, Fort Bliss. We're in the process of standing those up. Some of these are going to be new and existing, so the bed space, I don't have the exact count yet, but I will get you that exact count, sir.
Okay. Do you know, is DOD going to bill ICE for that? Is that going to be, how are the books going to be trued up between DOD and ICE for space in military facilities that are going to be used for detention activities?
Sir, ICE is providing the contracting vehicle, but the funding for that will come out of DOD budget, sir. So I'd have to refer you to DOD on that, sir.
Okay, so you don't expect to get a bill from DOD for their facilities for detention?
No, sir.
How about military airlift? Do you expect to get a bill from DOD for that, or are they going to absorb that in their budget?
No, sir. I'll refer you to DOD on that one, sir, for the proper answer. But no, sir, I do not expect a bill from DOD.
Okay? How many additional beds do you anticipate bringing online with the transferred funding of the $312.5 million that is the request that you put in for reprogramming?
We're looking to come online, sir, up to 60,000 beds at this time.
And that is through, what's the time frame for those coming online?
Through the beginning of fourth quarter this year, sir.
Okay? Will you still have a shortfall after this potential transferred funding? Do you know?
Sir, I can promise the committee and I guarantee that we're going to financially work within our means to ensure that we do not have a shortfall, sir.
Okay, finally, on information. This isn't on you, but frankly, information in a fast-moving budgetary environment is a precious thing. I would appreciate it if you, for your part, would let folks know up your chain of command that this information, if it's not coming in real time, is not useful. And so I'll leave it at that for purposes of our discussion. And I want to thank you for your service. I know it's not an easy time to do that. And obviously, speaking only for myself, I support your goal. But we also, at the same time, have to keep in mind things like the Anti-Deficiency Act and stuff like that. And I'll just be honest with you, speaking for me, I don't know that I have the information that I need to make sure that we're doing our job in the context of that. So we could really, really use that. Same thing I've told all other agency directors. We won't surprise you. Please do not surprise us. And so for members that have get-back questions, I would ask you to respond to those within 15 days of today. We ask also that for additional questions, that it's a 30-day timeline to get that back. Obviously, we're moving quickly on trying to move these bills. I thank you for your participation in today's hearing, and the subcommittee stands adjourned.